Which show started 10/10 and ended 10/10? Breaking Bad. But for me, that question isn't about a TV series, it's about my life. Everything was perfect. A stable job, a loving wife, and a house in the suburbs. But then, one mistake sent me spiraling down a path I never expected. It started when I picked up a second phone to handle some private business dealings, thinking I could keep my two worlds separate. Turns out, I was very wrong. At first, it was harmless. A few side gigs, a bit of extra cash, nothing too extreme. But as money rolled in, so did the risks. One day, a man named Ray contacted me. He spoke in short, clipped sentences and never repeated himself. He offered me a deal that seemed too good to be true because it was. I was supposed to deliver a package to an abandoned gas station. No questions asked. The pay? Triple what I made in a month. My gut told me to walk away, but my greed overruled my instincts. The night of the delivery, I felt like I was starring in my own crime thriller. I arrived at the gas station, heart pounding, hands sweating. I expected to see Ray, but instead, two men in dark suits stepped out of a black SUV. No words were exchanged. I handed over the package, they nodded, and that was it. Or so I thought. The next morning, I turned on the news and saw a story about a police raid. The package I delivered? It contained something that got a lot of important people arrested. My name wasn't mentioned, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Panic set in. I wiped my second phone, deleted every text, every call log, but the paranoia stayed. Every time a car slowed near my house, I braced for the worst. Then, one evening, my wife asked why I'd been acting so strange. I wanted to tell her everything, to confess and beg for help. But how do you tell the person you love that you might not be around much longer? That you've broken bad, and there's no turning back? So I lied, said work was stressful. She bought it for now. Then came the real nightmare. I found a note in my mailbox. No signature, no threats, just a single sentence. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. That night, I packed a bag. Cash, fake ID, burner phone. If they came for me, I'd be ready to run. But before I could leave, there was a knock at my door. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw Ray. His usual calm demeanor was gone. He looked angry, desperate. I had no choice but to open the door. Ray stepped inside and closed it behind him. You screwed up, he hissed. The people you crossed, they don't forget. I tried to explain that I didn't know what was in the package, but he shook his head. Doesn't matter. You're in it now. He handed me another package. This is your way out. One last job. I wanted to refuse, to walk away, but I knew better. If I said no, I wouldn't get another chance. So I took the package, sealing my fate. The next morning, I left town, drove for hours, never looking back. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to disappear. My wife? She'd wake up to a note saying I was sorry, that I loved her, that I'd never meant for things to go this way. Maybe one day, she'd understand. Maybe she'd hate me forever. But staying meant death. And as much as I regretted my choices, I wasn't ready to die. So here I am, somewhere far from home, using a fake name, living of stolen time. Maybe this is how it all ends. Maybe I'll never stop running. But if I've learned one thing, it's this. No matter how good the show starts, sometimes the ending is out of your hands. The Walking Dead. But for me, it's not just a show, it's my life now. It started a month ago when I woke up in a hospital bed with no memory of how I got there. The machines were off, the hallways were empty, and the silence was deafening. I stumbled out of bed, calling for a nurse, but no one answered. That's when I noticed the dried blood smeared across the walls. Something was very wrong. I made my way outside, expecting to see cars, people, something normal. Instead, the streets were deserted, littered with abandoned vehicles and broken glass. The air smelled foul, like something rotten. I thought maybe there had been an evacuation, but then I saw them people moving strangely, their skin pale, their eyes hollow. At first, I thought they were injured, but when one turned toward me, I saw its face. Half of it was missing, and then it lunged. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back, just ran. Every street looked the same, empty, ruined, dead. I found shelter in an old gas station, barricading the door with anything I could find. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. What had happened? Where was everyone? I checked my phone, no service. The radio? Static. Then I heard the scratching at the door. Slow, deliberate. I wasn't alone. And whatever was outside wasn't human anymore. I stayed put for days, rationing whatever snacks I could find. But food wasn't the worst problem, water was. My body was weak, my mind foggy. I knew I had to leave, but the streets were crawling with them. Then, on the fourth night, I saw something lights in the distance. A sign of life. I forced myself to move, slipping through alleyways, staying in the shadows. But hunger made me reckless. I stepped on broken glass. A snap echoed in the silence. They heard me. I ran into a store, slamming the door behind me. The dead pounded on the glass, their moans sending chills through me. I grabbed a crowbar from the floor, knowing it wouldn't be enough. Just as I thought it was over, the front window shattered, but not from them. A man burst through, firing a shotgun, clearing a path. "Come with me if you want to live," he said. I didn't hesitate. Sometimes you don't question your miracles. His name was Carter, and he led me to a small group of survivors hiding in a warehouse. They'd been fighting to stay alive since the outbreak began. That's when the reality hit me. This wasn't some temporary disaster. The world had ended, and no one was coming to save us. Carter handed me a knife. "Learn to use it," he said, "because out here, you're either the hunter or the hunted." The message was clear. The old rules were gone. Weeks passed, and I changed. The fear was still there, but so was something else: survival instincts. I learned how to fight, how to scavenge, how to stay one step ahead. But the hardest part, accepting that the people I saw out there weren't people anymore. That hesitation could get you killed. I wasn't the same person who woke up in that hospital. I wasn't weak anymore. I was something else now, something closer to them than I wanted to admit. So here I am, walking among the dead, part of a world that barely resembles the one I knew. Some nights, I wonder if I even survived at all. Maybe I died in that hospital and just didn't realize it. Maybe we all did. Because when the world ends, when everything familiar is gone, when you become someone you don't recognize, what's the difference between being alive and just walking dead? Better Call Saul. But for me, it's not just a TV show, it's the story of how I ruined my life trying to be clever. I always had a way with words, knew how to talk my way out of anything. It made me a great lawyer, but an even better liar. I thought bending the law in my favor was just part of the game. Turns out, the house always wins, and I was betting with borrowed time. It started small, helping a friend dodge a parking ticket, tweaking a few documents to smooth over a client's troubles. Then one day, a guy named Marco walked into my office with a problem. He was facing 5 years for something that, technically, he didn't do, at least not in a way the law could easily prove. I could get him off the hook, but I had to twist the truth a little. No harm, right? Well, that little twist set off a chain reaction I couldn't stop. Word spread fast. If you had a problem, I was the guy to call. Cash up front. No questions asked. At first, it felt like I was finally making something of myself. But then came the feathers, the kind you don't say no to. One day, a man in an expensive suit walked in, sat down, and slid a folder across my desk. "Make this go away," he said. I barely glanced at it before nodding. Big mistake. Because that case, it wasn't just about some low-level criminal. It was about people who don't forgive mistakes. A week later, my office was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. I was in too deep. I told myself I'd quit after this last case, walk away clean. But the thing about dirty money is that it never really washes off. That night, I got a call. "We have a problem," the voice said. "Fix it." And just like that, I wasn't a lawyer anymore, I was a fixer. The guy who cleaned up messes before they became headlines. I tried to stay ahead, but the walls were closing in. The feds started sniffing around. My bank accounts were flagged, and my clients, if you could call them that, were losing patience. Then, one morning, I found an envelope under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper with my home address and a time. Midnight. I knew exactly what it meant. I packed a bag, grabbed all the cash I could, and ran. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I drove for hours, crossing state lines, changing cars, using burner phones. But no matter how fast I ran, I knew I couldn't outrun them forever. I checked into a motel under a fake name, sat on the bed, and laughed bitterly. All my life, I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. Turns out, I was just another pawn. And now I was waiting for a knock on the door that would decide if I lived or disappeared for good. The funny thing is, if I could do it all over again, I don't think I'd change a thing. The rush, the power, the feeling of always being one step ahead, it was addictive. The law was never about justice for me. It was about winning. And for a while, I did. But the thing about playing the game is that eventually, you lose. And when you do, there's no one left to call. No lawyer, no lifeline. Just the consequences waiting to collect. So here I am, sitting in this dingy motel room, staring at the clock. Maybe they'll find me, maybe they won't. But either way, my show is almost over. And when the credits roll, there won't be a redemption arc. Just a lesson I learned too late. When you spend your life bending the rules, eventually, they snap back. Gravity Falls. But for me, it wasn't a show, it was the summer that changed everything. It started when my parents sent me to stay with my uncle in a tiny town hidden deep in the woods. I expected boredom, mosquito bites, and maybe some weird locals. What I got instead was a town that didn't make sense, a forest that felt alive, and a journal filled with secrets that no one was supposed to find. It all started with the symbols. Strange carvings on trees, markings on old buildings, things no one in town ever talked about. One night, I followed a set of them deep into the woods and found something I wasn't meant to see. A hidden bunker, rusted shut, covered in vines. I should have walked away, but curiosity is dangerous. With enough force, the door gave way, revealing a staircase leading underground. The air smelled like dust and something older. Inside, I found the journal. Its cover was worn, its pages filled with diagrams, warnings, and stories of creatures I had never heard of. Some seemed ridiculous multi-idea, time-traveling gnomes, but others felt real. One entry, dated decades ago, warned about something watching from the shadows. Do not make eye contact, it read. Do not let it know you see it. I laughed it off, thinking it was a prank. Then I looked up. In the far corner of the bunker, I saw something move. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light until I noticed the eyes. Not one pair, dozens. They blinked, shifting unnaturally, studying me. My body froze, every instinct screaming to run, but I couldn't. The journal fell from my hands. The thing in the corner tilted its head, like it was waiting for something. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I ran all the way back to my uncle's house, my heart pounding, the journal clutched tight in my hands. I told myself I imagined it, that I was just letting the weirdness of this town get to me. But that night, as I lay in bed, I saw something outside my window. A shadow, taller than any person should be, standing completely still. The moment I made eye contact, my vision blurred, and my head filled with a high-pitched ringing. When I blinked, it was gone. The next morning, my uncle was acting different. He smiled too much, his movements slightly off, like he was imitating himself. Sleep well, he asked, his voice a little too cheerful. My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, but the journal had another warning. If they notice you, they will try to replace you. Do not trust the ones who smile too much. I gripped the book tighter, forcing myself to nod. That was weeks ago. I don't sleep much anymore. The town feels different, like it's watching me. I see people staring a second too long, their expressions not quite right. I tried telling my uncle, but he just laughed, his smile never fading. I don't think it's really him anymore. I don't know if I'm next. All I know is that whatever I saw in that bunker wasn't just a story. It was a warning, and I was too late to listen. So here I am, pretending everything's normal, pretending I don't notice the way the shadows move when no one else is looking. I don't know how this ends, but I have a feeling I won't like it. The journal says there's a way to stop them, but the last few pages are torn out. Maybe that was on purpose. Maybe I was never supposed to read them. Maybe, just maybe, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Chernobyl. But for me, it wasn't a show, it was the night I saw a town die. I was just a technician, working late in the control room of Reactor 4 when the alarm started. We were told it was fine. Just a test, a routine check. But the ground shook, the lights flickered, and in that moment, I knew something had gone horribly wrong. Then the reactor lid blew off, and the world turned white. The first thing I remember after the blast was the silence. No sirens, no shouting, just this eerie, unnatural quiet. The air smelled metallic, thick with something I couldn't place. I looked around and saw my co-workers frozen in shock, faces pale. One of them coughed, and blood splattered onto his sleeve. That's when the screaming started. I turned to the window and saw the sky glowing, not from fire, but from something much worse. We were ordered to stay, to control the situation. But how do you control something invisible? Something killing you from the inside out? The dosimeters maxed out in seconds. We had no idea what that meant, just numbers on a screen, rising too fast. Then my supervisor staggered back, his face blistering before my eyes. Get out, he whispered. Get out now. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran, but the damage was already done. Outside, chaos ruled. Firemen without protection rushed toward the reactor, their faces already burning from radiation they couldn't see. People stood on their balconies, watching the glow like it was some kind of miracle. They didn't know. None of us knew. I wanted to scream at them to run, to hide, but my throat was raw, my vision already blurring. Then I saw the black rain start to fall, thick and heavy. It was too late. They evacuated the town the next day, but not fast enough. I remember the children playing in the streets, laughing, their parents packing as if they'd be home by the weekend. They didn't understand that home no longer existed. I was put on a truck with the others, but I already knew I wouldn't be leaving this disaster behind. My skin itched, my teeth ached, and every breath felt heavier. The poison was inside me now. There was no undoing it. Days passed in a haze of sickness. We were sent to hospitals, lined up like cattle, our bodies failing one by one. The doctors wouldn't say it, but we knew. We had seen what happened to the firefighters, how their skin blackened and peeled away, how they stopped looking human. I kept thinking about the moment before the explosion, the hum of the reactor, the quiet confidence that nothing could go wrong. How wrong we all were. Now, I lie in a sterile white room, my body barely my own. The nurses don't look at me anymore. They already know how this story ends. The world will move on, people will forget, and the officials will rewrite history to make it seem less terrible. But I remember the light, the silence, the moment everything changed. I remember watching death seep into the bones of a city that had no idea it was already gone. So here I am, waiting for the inevitable, knowing my name will be forgotten, just another number in a disaster too big to comprehend. But if anyone ever asks what happened at night, tell them the truth, that it wasn't just an accident, wasn't just a mistake. It was a lesson, one paid for in blood. And the worst part, no one will ever really learn from it. Band of brothers. But for me, it wasn't a show, it was a war. A war that chewed us up and spat us out as different men. We landed in Normandy before dawn, the sky lit by flak and tracer rounds. I gripped my rifle so tight my fingers ached. The ramp dropped, and we hit the water. Bullets snapped past my head. Men fell around me, and all I could do was keep moving. That was the first time I saw death up close, but it wouldn't be the last. We pushed inland, fighting for every inch. The fields of France were beautiful, even as they burned. My squad became my family, and we learned fast hesitation meant death. I remember one night in a foxhole, rain pouring down, mud soaking through my uniform. My buddy Thompson lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "You think we'll make it home?" he asked. I lied and said yes. 2 days later, he was gone. Just a name on a list now. Bastogne was hell frozen over. No food, no ammo, just endless snow and the distant boom of enemy artillery. Frostbite turned our feet black, but the Germans didn't care. They pounded us day and night, waiting for us to break. We never did. We wrapped ourselves in whatever we could find, shared whatever rations we had left. At night, we took turns keeping watch, listening to the eerie silence between explosions. Some men prayed, some just stared into the dark. I learned quickly that war doesn't care about heroes. It doesn't care about medals or speeches. It's a game of survival, and sometimes even the best lose. I remember a guy named Riley Good Soldier, always followed orders. One day, he stepped on a mine. It wasn't like in the movies. No scream, no dramatic goodbye. Just a flash, and then he was gone. We didn't even have time to mourn. We kept moving, because stopping meant dying. When we finally crossed into Germany, we found things that shattered whatever innocence we had left. Concentration camps, walking corpses behind barbed wire, their eyes hollow, their bodies barely human. I had thought I had seen the worst war had to offer. I was wrong. The smell, the silence, the sheer weight of it, it was worse than any battlefield. We freed them. But what do you say to a man who has already lost everything? Even after the fighting stopped, the war never really left us. Some men went home and never spoke of it again. Others drank themselves into oblivion. Me, I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, expecting to hear the whistle of incoming shells. I still see their faces, Thompson, Riley, all the others who never made it back. They say time heals, but some wounds never close. They just fade into scars, reminders of what we lost. I never wanted to be a hero. None of us did. We just wanted to survive, to go home, to live normal lives. But war doesn't let you walk away clean. It takes something from you, leaves you with ghosts that never stop whispering. People call us the greatest generation. I don't know about that. We were just kids, thrown into something too big to understand. We did our duty. We fought. And for better or worse, we came back different men. So here I am, An old man with medals I don't care about and memories I can't escape. They tell our stories in books and TV shows, but they'll never really understand. Not the fear, the exhaustion, the way death becomes just another part of the job. We were a band of brothers, bound not by glory, but by survival. And if I had to do it all over again, I don't know if I'd have the strength to. But I do know one thing: we never left each other behind. Not then, not ever.